Hey everyone, welcome back. Over the last week, Kevin McCarthy has been having a little bit of trouble over in the House of Representatives. It seems that a few of the most extreme members of his caucus have decided to start their own pseudo-filibuster in the House, denying Kevin McCarthy the votes he needs in order to bring several bills up for a vote on the floor. Now these bills are just messaging bills with no chance of actually being signed into law, so they don't matter very much. But what this group of extreme conservatives is trying to demonstrate is that, hey Kevin, you're not really in charge. We are. We made you speaker back in January, and when we did that, we had a deal, and you broke the deal. Specifically, they're upset with the way that Kevin McCarthy negotiated with Joe Biden to raise the debt ceiling and avoid a default. They don't like how light the spending cuts were, and they certainly aren't happy that more Democrats voted for the bill than Republicans. So, they're staging their own protest and essentially stopping anything from happening in the House until Kevin McCarthy ensures them that their demands will be met in the future. Now, to his credit, Kevin McCarthy has been able to negotiate himself a reprieve, and the defectors have said that they will give him a week where their business will resume as normal, but if they're not satisfied at the end of the week, they might start it up again. So we'll have to see how this plays out, and quite honestly, I think Kevin McCarthy is at a crossroads for his speakership. So, in this video, I wanted to discuss with you all what Kevin McCarthy's options might be and how they might play out. A lot of these negotiations are focused on the next big battle in Washington, which is, of course, the budget. Current appropriations are set to expire, I believe, September 30th, so sometime between now and then, a budget has to be passed and money has to be allocated so the government can continue functioning. Otherwise, we get a government shutdown. Now, this more extreme wing of the party wants to essentially do the same thing with the government shutdown that they did with the debt ceiling. Hold it hostage in order to extract deep cuts from the Democrats. And given that they didn't get it the first time, they're pretty adamant about getting it this next go-around. Otherwise, there's not really going to be a good chance to do this until about July or August of next year. So, Kevin McCarthy is in a little bit of a pickle. Is he going to side with them and force a government shutdown? Or is he going to do something very similar to what he did with the debt ceiling and end up cutting a deal with the Democrats where he gets the majority of his party, a majority of the Democratic Party, and we actually get to see a little bit of bipartisanship in Washington? Let's start off with the government shutdown route. Now, I think Kevin McCarthy might be a little bit more open to shutting down the government than he was with defaulting on the U.S. debt, as we've had a few government shutdowns in recent history, and the economic fallout hasn't been catastrophic. It's been bad, but not nearly as bad as a U.S. default would have been, so he might be a little bit more comfortable taking the hard line and saying, if we don't get the cuts that I want, and by I mean my friends over there, I will turn this government around. And we'll see what happens. One way it might work out is he might actually get more concessions from the Biden administration. He didn't this time around, but who knows what'll happen next time. But the other thing that could happen is that the Democrats could actually be forced to use a discharge petition. They've still got that piece of legislation sitting around that they could use for the mechanism, and if the government shutdown runs long enough, they might be able to peel off enough of those swing district Republicans and go, hey, we need to get the government running, so how about we just stick to the deal we already passed, we keep the budget in line with that, and we move forward. This works because the government restarts, people get their services back, and Kevin McCarthy can pull a Pontius Pilate and wash his hands and say, hey, Freedom Caucus, don't get mad at me. I did not bring this up for vote. This is the rhinos' fault. It's not my fault. Please leave me alone. And they probably will. You'll get your Matt Gaetzes and such that will attack the more moderate members of their party. You'll have some Republican infighting, and in the meantime, Kevin McCarthy will continue to pass these messaging bills with the goal of preparing to campaign in 2024 as opposed to governing in the present. Because if you're only passing messaging bills along with a couple of truly must-pass pieces of legislation, the only goal is to set up a message where we say, okay, as the Republican Party, these are the bills we would like to pass into law, and if you agree with these bills, you should elect more Republicans to the Senate and the White House so we can actually pass them into law. Now, I don't advise that, the policies are not very good, but that's a topic for another video. On the other hand, Kevin McCarthy could repeat what he did with the debt ceiling, where he negotiates with the White House to come to an agreement that can eventually pass with a majority of both parties voting for it. Now, obviously this would alienate that more extreme wing of the Republican Party, but it also provides Kevin McCarthy an opportunity to push back on that group and say, hey, Yeah, you may make or break our majority in Congress, but remember, you are not the majority of the Republican Party. You guys wouldn't have any power at all if it wasn't for the rest of us. So, how about you be a little bit more cooperative going forward, eh? Now, obviously, the MAGA wing of the Republican Party isn't going to like that, and you will probably see more rebellion, more of these pseudo-filibusters in the House where they will deny Kevin McCarthy votes to bring party line votes to the floor, but it does offer Kevin McCarthy the ability to choose to be a little bit more moderate and to put some distance between the Republican Party and its MAGA component. And this could also be beneficial going into an election year because it means that Kevin McCarthy might actually be able to pass bills that then President Biden eventually signs, which I believe is more valuable than a messaging bill, as it shows that you can get things done, and that's something that everybody has difficulty with in Washington, so I think that would end up being a powerful message to voters for Republicans. Now, obviously this would also work for Democrats, as they would be in the negotiating room as well, and generally speaking, I think a degree of bipartisanship does help, as long as it is good faith bipartisanship. But, again, that's a totally different story. Now, of course, we get to the big question, which is, how is this all going to play out? In my opinion, we're most likely to see some variation of the government shutdown scenario, as, quite frankly, that's where a lot of the GOP's political incentives intersect. A lot of House Republicans are in gerrymandered districts, so they're more concerned about losing a primary election to a more extreme member of their party than they are about losing the general election to whoever the Democrat is. So they really want to keep passing these messaging bills to appease the more extreme wing of their voter base, as that's who's statistically most likely to vote in those primary elections, and shockingly, elected Republicans want to keep their seats, just like every other elected representative. So that really is the more beneficial path for them. Additionally, when it comes to a government shutdown, it's not nearly as consequential as a default on the debt would have been. We've had them in the past, and while, yes, they have a lot of negative economic consequences, and they are certainly really painful for those people who rely on government services, both parties have shown that they can weather the political firestorm that a government shutdown brings, and the Republicans might be a lot more comfortable with forcing the government to shut down rather than forcing it to default on its debt and causing a global economic crisis. However, of course, politics is a rapidly changing landscape, so we're going to have to keep an eye on this. But I think we'll get a pretty good idea where Kevin McCarthy is leaning based on how he decides to deal with the troublemakers he's got over the next week or so. Think about it.